Thank you all. Thank you, Mia, and thank you to the Lighthouse 3 team for inviting me. I'm super excited to be amongst such technology giants in the AI ethics space, and so I'm super excited about presenting today. So for those that don't know, I'm Elizabeth Adams. I work at the intersection of cybersecurity and AI ethics with a focus on digital inclusion and digital justice. I am also United Nations AI advisor for their AI digital cooperation, where I work with stakeholders on how best to partner and to drive digital inclusion, digital access and understanding, and develop ways to share our best practices across the globe. I am also a 2020 Stanford University Race and Tech Fellow, where my work is centered in working with elected officials, appointees, and commissions here in the city of Minneapolis on developing ordinances for public oversight of surveillance tech, and that's what this presentation will focus on. And my hope for this presentation is that you will have two takeaways. One, first, a better understanding of what public oversight of surveillance tech is as defined by the coalition I'm a part of here in Minneapolis, and two, what it means for the city of Minneapolis. But let me first just take 60 seconds to talk a little bit about my fellowship. So I designed my fellowship to cover three interconnected parts. First, the civic tech portion, which we will talk about. And then the next portion is a tech insertion model that I developed to uncover and eliminate racism, basically as a litmus test for the Black community. So many of the racial injustices we experience, as you know, are not new. So now more than ever in the age of data, we have an opportunity as a community to ask questions about the technology that is making its way into our lives. And so does it help or not? Is it helping us to thrive? So that is why I developed that model. And the third part is just a vision for a coordinated community response command center that I'm hopeful that as communities begin to take ownership of the technologies that we're adopting in our communities and we're working better with city government, that we can have a community-driven response to things such as a fire or a flood or homelessness or other natural disasters. So let's dig into the civic tech portion. So I was happy to catch a portion of Sita's presentation. One of the folks in her group, Tawana Petty, is also a cohort at Stanford. And so I was extremely excited about that work. And I was also excited to hear what Renee had, because I think all of this fits in with a lot of the work around public oversight. So POSTME stands for Public Oversight of Surveillance Technology and Military Equipment. And the POSTME MN, which is Minnesota, is based on the ACLU's nationwide community control over police surveillance measure. It's a CCOPS effort. And the CCOPS model bill has been adopted by major cities, and we drafted our ordinances in Minneapolis specifically based on three things. One, we received feedback from adjacent cities who are also pursuing similar measures, New York, Oakland, Seattle, St. Louis, to name a few. We also wanted to be inclusive of the many different types of surveillance technologies that are popping up, and we heard Renee speak about a number of those. We also wanted to incorporate feedback from the city, as well as city council members, city staff, appointees, and commissions. And so our ordinances, our POSTME ordinances, have been a live document for the past several months. So our hope is that Minneapolis will be the next city to adopt transparency, oversight, accountability, and equity in its uses for surveillance tech. I'd like to invite you to connect with POSTME MN for more information and to stay current with the work that we're doing here in Minneapolis. So why POSTME MN? Well, the community in Minneapolis, like many communities around the world, are pushing for more police accountability, simply put. And communities are also pushing for more transparency and oversight of the technology used by law enforcement, simply put. So in February of 2020, the Minneapolis City Council adopted data privacy principles, which include language such as the city must inform its residents when they are collecting the data, why they are collecting it, what it's being used for, and how long they are planning to keep the data. So this is a great step forward as momentum for POSTME, and having the community involved to provide oversight of surveillance tech is a great way to start reforming abusive practices, which we hope will lead to the larger goal of social change and transparency. But let me pause just for a second because I am in Minnesota. I'm a native Minnesotan, and I live just a few miles from the George Floyd Memorial. And I've been there, and I've stood steps from where George Floyd took his last breath. And I will tell you that it's chilling. And it helped me develop more purpose for this work. And so one of the ways that I do that is to get involved at the data policy level as an appointee for the City of Minneapolis's Racial Equity Community Advisory Committee. And I work very, very hard with elected officials and other appointees and commissions to make sure that they understand the importance of technology and how we need to frame it within our racial equity framework here in the City of Minneapolis. So we have to find a better way, and we're working very hard in Minneapolis to find that better way. So just a quick overview of the types of surveillance technologies that are included in our POSTME bill. We're talking computer vision. There's been a lot of talk about facial recognition. We're also including gait recognition as well as license plate readers. We are going to be addressing location tracking, and I'll cover a little bit more about drones and aerial surveillance in a minute. But we're also now considering the Amazon Ring camera. Renee talked about that, but there are over 1,000 police departments that have contracts with Amazon Ring, which means they have more access to data which can be used in surveillance. And biometric surveillance. So I'll also cover heartbeat lasers. But one additional thing I wanted to include is the surveillance of energy consumption and smart grid surveillance. So through our research, we learned that there's a growing number of landlords or other interested parties who are requesting or desire to track a renter's movement by their energy consumption. And so we're learning that this data will help them possibly determine if a person who is on the lease, if it's the right number of people that are on that lease. So we wanted to make sure that we included that in our ordinances because we are advocating for transparency. So the one thing I will tell you real quickly is that we are advocating for a facial recognition ban because here in Minneapolis, they are using the Clearview AI surveillance. But for the other technologies, we're not advocating for a ban, just more public oversight and transparency. So let's talk about drone and aerial surveillance really quickly. So just like the rest of the world, thousands of people here joined in protest against systemic racism and police brutality. And law enforcement is using this powerful surveillance tool to track them. And drones have been used here in Minneapolis as well as other cities. So I won't read this slide verbatim, but drones have been really used at the US borders for some time now, and they have been flying over protesters in Minneapolis, Portland, St. Louis, New York, and other major cities. And they've been diverted from the US borders to these major cities. However, just because someone is out protesting doesn't necessarily mean they're out rioting or that they're interested in overthrowing the government. And so drone surveillance can capture your movements during times of unrest and protest and can be later used along with other aggregated data to create a profile or a narrative about you. So when technology is used as part of a larger surveillance program to overreach into communities, to track and trace, that is why we believe we absolutely need public oversight. So let's talk about heartbeat lasers or Jetsons. So this is a US military laser that can ID your unique heartbeat hundreds of feet away. So other types of identification such as facial recognition, they can be derailed if faces are even partially obscured. But in contrast, cardiac patterns are difficult for an individual to change deliberately. So enter Jetson. It reads your heartbeat from a distance through biometry, a contact-free laser technique that measures the vibration on surface. So there are limitations, such as there's the inability to penetrate through thick clothing. There's also the need for a cardiac signature database and the inability for it to read on moving targets. But cardiac identification could be used to support other biometric identification methods. So this slide just kind of highlights the timeline for the civic tech process, and it has been very fulfilling, and I've been very fortunate to have access to a number of elected officials here. I've spoken to the chief of police, through the Racial Equity Community Advisory Committee, through a number of council members that I meet with on a regular basis, as well as working with a brilliant group of coalition partners. But the first quarter was really where the fellowship kicked off, started having these initial meetings, started kind of doing some research, and then the second quarter joined the coalition, started meeting with council members, building our requirements, and we were also fortunate enough to get some pro bono support as well to kind of look through the draft ordinances. Third quarter, last month, our ordinances were actually introduced by one of our council members here and unanimously approved by the Minneapolis City Council to move into committee. So what that means is our draft ordinances are with a number of city officials and staff, and they are reviewing the ordinances, one for definition processes, just to make sure that they understand the level of effort once these ordinances are passed. So we're having those meetings, we're working with them weekly, and fourth quarter, we are actually hoping to have these ordinances passed, and we were hoping that if I get invited back, I'll have a success story for you guys. So this is my last slide. It basically just says that this is a civic tech process, which is really about community and government working together. As I mentioned, I am fortunate that we do have city council members, as well as a strong community support to making sure that there's public oversight of these technologies as they are inserted into our communities. And with that, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free. I have other articles about tech inclusion and a few other things. And I've also written a couple of children's books, and that is it. So just want to send a huge thank you to Mia and the Lighthouse 3 team for, again, inviting